Hey everyone, just a quick note before we get started. Today's episode originally published in June of 2018. It's a very special episode. It's a very special time. It's my dad's birthday, so hope you enjoy.
Hey yo, it's Cedro. Holler at the people. 10,000 tacos.
Welcome to 10,000 Tacos. 10,000 Tacos is a podcast that takes a look at the world, the taco world and beyond, through the eyes of a taquero. I'm Isidro Salas, your host, and I grew up in a taco truck, and I want to share with you those experiences and many of those lessons that have shaped the way I look at the world today.
Tacos. Yo. 10,000
after the transition on the right is Vela, on the left is Chicharito, Corin with a run! By Mexico! A historic one for the legendary CH14, Javier Hernandez Balcazar, Chicharito.
If you're hearing that, that means that you know it is World Cup time. The World Cup, it's in full swing. 2018, the World Cup is being hosted by Russia. And for 32 countries, it's a chance for them to play in a tournament to say who is the best at football. Here in America, we call it soccer, but the rest of the world seems to call it football. So I will try and oblige. We do have some downloads that come in from the UK, Sweden, Italy, and France, as well as Switzerland. So I'm going to try pronounce it the way it's supposed to, which is football. And by the way, by the time this podcast is published, it will be the night before Sweden and Mexico play. So we do have some Swedish listeners, and no harm. We'll just let things be the way they are. So by the time you listen to this episode, the match will probably be, 3-1 Mexico. Ooh, just got people mad. Anyway, so the reason I'm bringing up the World Cup is because it's also a very special time for me around this time. In late June is my father's birthday. As a matter of fact, it's June 24th. Again, by the time this episode publishes, he will have turned 82 years old. He was born in 1936. Now, a little bit of history here. The very first World Cup, the very first tournament was held in 1930 in Uruguay. So he was born around the time that this great tournament started. I don't think he was connected to it in any way, but just take a step back to appreciate a little bit of that history. My father's been alive for almost as long as the World Cup tournament itself. I just think that's pretty remarkable. I think it's kind of cool. And so today on the show, I wanted to tell you a little bit about how these little connections that go into relationships, and in a broader step, like the way I can relate. When I go in to bite into a taco, I don't really think about what it is or where it came from and who put it together, right? I just go to wherever I'm going to go to, whether it's a taqueria, whether it's a truck, and I just want the taco. So what I don't really think about that much is how that taco got there, right? All the necessary pieces that had to come together, right? The tortillas weren't made there. The meat wasn't made there. The cilantro wasn't grown there. All those things came together so that I could have my taco, along with other people that, of course, ordered theirs. But we don't think about these things, but they're just as critical. So today on this episode, I'm going to go back and forth in a couple of time frames. One, 1994. Two, 1978. Now, 1978, if you've been listening to the show, you hopefully remember that that was the year that we came to this country. So I'll go back to 1994 and a little bit to 1978. And then I'll tie it up and talk a little bit about the network or the underground network or whatever you want to call it. But the things that had to have happened, specifically the people that needed to meet in order for me to be speaking into this microphone today. So we'll begin with 1994. The reason I'm bringing 1994, 24 years ago. Now, the World Cup is held every 4 years. It's similar to the Olympics. Every 4 years, a host country will host all these games, and it's 32 teams. By the way, about several weeks ago, FIFA, the governing body of the World Cup, and for the majority of the world, they announced the 2026 games, and the United States, along with Canada and Mexico, won the bid to host. And it's the first time that tournament is going to go from 32 countries, 32 teams, to 48. So it's a very exciting time because it's 8 years away, and we all know how time flies, especially as you get older. It just flies. So before you know it, it's going to be held here in Mexico, the United States, and in Canada. It's going to be pretty exciting, especially when you see all these new stadiums coming up, I'm pretty sure. And we'll probably have a game here too in Santa Clara in Levi Stadium. I don't know if it'll still be called Levi Stadium at the time, but hey, we'll give it a shot. But anyway, going back to 1994, it was a year that the United States, the World Cup, was going to be hosted in the United States, here in our backyard. And I say backyard because, of course, the United States is pretty big. There's a lot of venues where games were going to be played. But when the games were announced, one of my buddies, one of my very close friends, gives me a call and he says, hey, we're going to get tickets to the 4th of July World Cup game here in Palo Alto, which is Stanford Stadium. And of course, I was like, hey, absolutely. He's all, are you in? I'm like, hell yeah, I'm in. And he says, yeah, we're going to probably get extra tickets. He's all, I'm thinking of taking my dad. And boom, right away, it clicks in me. Of course, I'm going to take my dad too. So I asked him to get 2 tickets, one for me and one for my dad. And then he was going to take his dad. And another one of our friends, his father was already gone. So I don't know. Eventually invited another friend. But anyway, we knew we were going to go to a World Cup match. At that time, we didn't know which teams were going to play because that ticket was for a second round game, which means that all the teams that play in the first round, the teams that get out of that go in and play in the second round. So it was yet to be determined. The tournament hadn't even started. When we got these tickets, it was way before the tournament had even started. But we knew we were going to go to that 4th of July game. So I didn't tell my dad that we were going to go. I was going to surprise him, which is cool, right? I just figured, hey. And again, my dad's birthday is around that time. So I figured, it's going to be his birthday, June 24th. 4th of July is not that far away. Actually, my mom's birthday is July 6th. So it actually should have been her. But, oops, sorry, Mama. Let's give it a little bit of time because I think she listens to the show. Anyway, I just knew it was going to be a perfect birthday gift for my dad. So the day comes. And by the time this day, the United States had a very good squad. And they were having a pretty good run. They had won enough games so they could get into the second round, which was the group of 16. And guess who they were going to play? Well, as luck would have it, they were going to play Brazil to move on to the next round. So Brazil has been a superpower in World Cup soccer, World Cup football for a very long time. Their teams seem to, every 4 years they turn up players that just are amazing with their dribbling skills. They're amazing strikers. A striker is the one that shoots the ball from 25 yards and just booms it in there. I mean, they had always had these players that are just awesome. And so Brazil was going to play the United States, and we were so excited because not only was it my dad's birthday for me, but it was also 4th of July. It's when we celebrate our independence, so it's a very, very joyous time. And then the United States was going to play against Brazil, so all the elements were just bunching up together, which was awesome. We go, and I tell my buddy, hey, I'm gonna drive. I'll take, I'll pick everybody up and I'll drive. 1994, I'm 23. I don't really drink that much in front of my dad. Anyway, so I go and, I get in the van. My dad gets in the van. We go pick up my buddy. At the time, his dad didn't live with him, so we had to go somewhere else to pick up his dad. So we go and pick up my buddy. I drive up to his dad's place. And I know his dad. I've known his dad for a while. My buddy, I've known him since the late 80s, so I've met his father, so it's nothing new to me. But I have it in the back of my mind that as soon as he comes in, van, that I'm going to introduce him. I'm going to say, hey, Dad, this is Eliseo. And it's in my head that I'm going to introduce him because I don't believe they've never met. Why would I think that they've never met? And so right before I'm about to introduce him, Eliseo says to my dad, oh, hey, ¿cómo estás, Juan? And my dad says, hey, Eliseo. And they greet each other. And my buddy and I look at each other going, what that I remember, and now I may have to bring in my buddy for this, but that I remember, we both looked at each other like, what? I didn't know that my dad knew his dad. And he didn't know, obviously, that his dad knew my dad. So we were like, wow. And I don't recall the exact moments of that particular thing, but I know in the back of my mind, I was just thinking, wow, that is kind of cool that they know each other. So we go on, we get to the game, we go into the stadium. It's an awesome day. The United States played an awesome, awesome game against Brazil. They held their own. Just a little bit of details about that game. The first half went off. It was 0-0. And then in the 77th minute, Bebeto from Brazil scores. And it's not a dramatic goal. It's not this great goal. He just happened to pass by Alexi Lalas, a defender back then. And he kind of just kicks the ball and it goes to the left side of the net and they score. And that was it. It was 1-0. A lot of people's hearts were broken because we really felt that the United States was on that verge. And I tell you, even though the U.S. national team didn't qualify for this year's World Cup, it was that World Cup in 1994 that really people started taking the United States serious because they had an awesome club. They had a lot of great players in there, and they just kept that tradition for a little while. The United States is still a team to be reckoned with. I love Mexico. I was born in Mexico, and Mexico is my first shot. But there was a time that I realized that, especially that I'm in America. I live in the United States now, and it was the first time I felt, man, that sucks that they're not going to be in there. So obviously it was a very, very emotional game for me because I got to spend it with my dad. My buddy got to spend it with his dad. And so I had always wondered, what was that connection that they had? How did they know each other? What was that connection? And how did they meet? As it turns out, when my dad decided, or when my parents decided that my father was going to come up to the United States, there was one person that he reached out to, or that he was in constant communication with, and that was my uncle Manuel. And he was already here in the United States. He had already been up in California. And the circle of friends and family members that he had here were the same people that my buddy's dad hung out with. Of course, I didn't know that. My dad didn't know that. And so when my uncle and my father got together to talk about what was it going to be, what was it going to look like to move up to a new country, my uncle Manuel is the one that helped them with not only moving, but settling in, helping my father settle in. He got him a job here. And then, of course, he had to find a place to stay. So, my uncle helped him with that as well. And so by the time when my father and Eliseo got to see each other in 1994, they already knew each other. They called each other by first name. And so I always wondered, what was that connection? And as it turns out, the connection is my buddy's dad is compadre with Chuy and Raquel. And as you'll find out later, the connection between Chuy and mi tío Manuel will become even more clear. And so when the first night that I remember when we drove up in 1978, when we came across the border and we drove for a long distance, remember a few episodes back, the episode called Trust the Tortilla. Towards the end, I said that we just drove for a long time. We ended up in the Bay Area, ended up in San Jose. When we got here, there was a house that we went to and we ended up staying there for weeks. So this family had opened up their home to us. And they allowed us to stay there. They, husband and wife, Chuy and Raquel, opened up their home to us. My earliest memories were sleeping in a house where we woke up and had breakfast. And, we even enrolled in school. Chuy and Raquel did that. They were very generous to open up their home to us. Now, Chuy and my uncle Manuel, and I'm not too sure about this. This is what I've heard in the past, that they're somewhat related. And that's how we had a place to stay when we got here. And Raquel had a sister. Her name was Leonor, but we called her Non. And as a matter of fact, we started calling her Tia Non. It was Non who helped my mom furnish her kitchen when we first got a home to rent, when we moved into this home almost weeks or perhaps a month after we arrived to this country. It was Non who, my mom recently told me that Non had given her our first set of dishes. And the reason she told me that is because recently Leonor passed away. And my mom was very saddened about that. She wished she would have had a chance to say thank you. Because as a kid, I didn't know this, and kids take this for granted if they're eating something off a plate, they don't know where that plate came from. In our case, it came from Non. So Non gave us our plates. Raquel gave us a place to sleep. Chuy had been the person that went down to pick up my mom and drove her up. So all these were done because of my uncle. So when you put all these pieces together, it really does shine a light on the connections. And all this was done, again, because of my uncle, mi tío Manuel. My dad, a little bit, again, his 82nd birthday was a couple of days ago. He has a hard time accepting, or I shouldn't say accepting, but he now suffers from onset of dementia. He forgets a lot of short-term things, and he consistently asks for my uncle Manuel. He's consistently asking him, is he here? And he's not. Tío Manuel passed away several years ago. Around that time, I was when he passed away, it hit me pretty hard because it'd been quite a bit of time since I'd seen him. So I decided to write myself. I posted it up on Facebook, and I'm going to read you that post. My heart is aching for my father, Juan. Several days ago, we lost his older brother, Manuel, Tío Manuel, to be exact. Though it is taboo to say, but his passing was sort of a relief because it meant he didn't have to suffer anymore. He was 83 years old, suffering from many of the ailments that affect people his age. My dad, who at the time was 80, he had just turned 80, is not exempt from many of these ailments. Aside from his ailments, my dad has to go through on a daily basis. Now he has to contend with the loss of his older brother. My tío's death is having an impact on me as well. I had not seen my uncle since I was about 18 years old, which is about 26, 27 years ago. And I'm feeling sorry for my father and my cousins, but I'm also taking time to reflect that the fact that if it weren't for my uncle Manuel, mi tío Manuel, I probably would not be here today. In 1978, my uncle helped my father come to the U.S. He was instrumental in getting him the money and connecting him with the people who would get him across the border. And once here, my uncle helped my dad get a job and begin the arduous process of inevitably bringing us here. I have a wonderful life here today. I'm very grateful for the sacrifices my parents have made to allow my siblings and I to enjoy our life here in the U.S. But I'd be remiss if I didn't pay proper respects to the man who helped this happen. Today, we take advantage of various social networks to communicate on a grand scale. In 1978, it was a different network. Several days ago, my uncle entered the grandest of networks that exist. Thank you, Tío, and enjoy your journey to the ultimate network. Sometimes we may not be talking about tacos and burritos and Mexican food. Sometimes we don't have to. Because like I've mentioned before, the hidden ingredients that go into making a great taco aren't seen, but they're always tasted. And that is all for this episode. Thanks again for joining us and being a part of our podcast.